Evening peeps, good evening everyone. How's everyone doing? Hopefully you're all doing okay. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you guys are new to the channel. Don't forget as well to like and share the vids. Thank you very, very much. I'm having one of those days where just not feeling it. I don't know if you guys ever get like this where you're not feeling it, but you can't pinpoint the reason. I can't tell you what's wrong. I'm just not really feeling it today. It's been a good day as well. I did a Boxing Social podcast with Rob Tebbit, Andy Clark and Barry Jones, which was really good, really fun. It was a good day at work, got some really good news that I'll share with you guys when I can. But I don't know, just not feeling it today. So I thought, you know what, after work, let me go gym. That normally helps. Every time I feel a bit stressed, I go gym. Finished gym, went home, still not feeling it. So I thought, you know what, let's get here and let's film a video. Let's go to my happy place. It's a bit late, just coming up to 10:30, but I always prefer to be here late anyway. So let's see if this will help. All right, what is there to talk about today? You know what I did want to talk about? A fight that's going under the radar. To be fair, look, it's a fight I didn't even know was happening until 4 or 5 days ago, and that's Gary Russell Jr. defending his WBC featherweight crown against MAGSAYO, the unbeaten Filipino as well. I think he's 23-0 with 16 knockouts. I think we're seeing a lot of Filipino fighters that have been sort of birthed, if you like, because of Manny Pacquiao, because of Casemiro, because of Nonito Donaire, MAGSAYO. It's interesting actually that I say that about Pacquiao, because when I've watched a few MAGSAYO fights recently, like Julio Ceja fight recently, he fights a bit. I can see that he's modelled himself on Manny Pacquiao. That's only the comparison I'm going to make. To be fair, even Manny Pacquiao said that when he watches Mark reminds him of a younger Manny Pacquiao. I'm not quite sure about that, if I'm honest with you, but I can see that he's modelled himself on Pac-Man a little bit, especially when he fights in bursts. Like obviously Manny Pacquiao was famous for throwing like 6, 7, 8 punch combinations. MAGSAYO does exactly that as well, exactly that. The only difference is he's not as fast as Manny Pacquiao. His feet certainly aren't as fast as well. So when I said not as fast, I meant his hands. His feet aren't as fast as well. And I don't think he has a good as chin as Manny Pacquiao either. I don't think so anyway. So every time he comes in, because he's not as fast, he gets tagged. He gets tagged on the way and he leaves his chin up in the air and he gets put down. He got put down in his last fight. But he gets up and he can crack. He's a bit right-hand happy, but he's a good fighter. He's a very good fighter, in fact. Hence why he is unbeaten. Hence why that I think, and this is a big shout, and I'll explain a bit more further into the video why I think this, we could have our first big upset of the year, and this will be a big one. Like 2021 was full of upsets. Look, Gary Russell Jr. is the favourite, hence why it'll be an upset, but we could have an upset here. MAGSAYO is a good boxer, people. Again, you can put him down. He's been put down, I think, a couple of times. I've seen fights of these that he's been put down, but he gets up. He can crack a bit. Again, he fights in bursts and he just jumps in. Very similar to Manny Pacquiao. He just jumps in. He's not waiting for you. He'll commit. He'll commit. And look, if you don't have good foot movement and good defense, you're going to have a bit of a problem with him. He's there as well until the final bell. His power goes up until the 12 rounds as well. It's not like his power starts to wane. No. His power goes all the way to 12s. Like, there's a lot of times in his fights where he's been down on the scorecards and his power's got him out of trouble. So he's got a lot going for him as MAGSAYO. So look, I think this is going to be a very interesting fight. It's a fight that I have to admit, a few days ago when I found out, I was like, I might watch it. Now I'm definitely watching it. I really am watching it because I think this could be one of the fights of the year if it gets going, or, as I said, I think there could be an upset. Now look, Gary Russell Jr. is one of the fighters that frustrates me the most. I can't lie to you. He will say a lot of the reasons he's been inactive is not down to him. It's always down to you, really. It is. I mean, there are extenuating circumstances. Look, number one, his head trainer, his dad, had his leg amputated because of a medical reason. I mean, look, that will keep you out of the ring. I don't care who you are. I think a year ago or about 18 months ago, one of his brothers passed away as well. So don't get me wrong. Look, the last 2 years haven't been good for Gary Russell Jr., but this is not just about that last 2 years. As I've mentioned this a few times, the last time he fought more than once a year was 2014. That's the last time. Again, 2015 once. So basically, all the way up once a year. He didn't even fight last year. So he's been very inactive. He's 33 now. I thought his last fight against, I've got the guy's name here actually, because it's very difficult to pronounce, Nyambaya, I thought he looked like he was slipping just a little bit. Not a lot, but again, just a little bit from the Gary Russell Jr. that we know was a very, very good fighter, very fast, very accurate with his punches, very, very highly skilled. I don't know if he's still that. I'm not quite sure. And if he isn't above 90%, so the 90% of the best Gary Russell Jr., like if he comes into the ring, undercooked a little bit here, so it's the 75% of Gary Russell Jr., I think he loses. I think he does. I really do think he loses. So we've got to see a very, very good Gary Russell Jr. here defend his WBC featherweight strap. And I don't think it's going to be easy. Mentally, I don't know where he is because of the situation with his dad. He's already spoken about the fact he's trained himself. So in the corner, you're probably going to see family members, brothers. I don't know who we're going to see in the corner, but it's not going to be his dad. That's a fact. So, I'm not super convinced about this one. I'm not. I mean, look, I think Gary Russell Jr. is a fantastic fighter, but there's a couple of things that will kill guys in the lower weight classes. Number one, inactivity. That will kill anyone. Number two, and the biggest one is you've got to make those right steps in jumping weight all the time, I think. Like, Gary Russell Jr. has made 126 from the get-go. He's 33 now. It must be so difficult to get into that weight division. It must be difficult. And I think, or I would have expected Gary Russell Jr. by now, I know he's quite short, I think he's about 5'4", 5'5", but I would have expected him by now to be fighting at 130, 135 pounds. Honestly, again, bear in mind, he fought Loma in 2013, and I think he mentioned something about struggling to make the weight then. That was what? 9 years ago. Do you know what I mean? So, look, I don't know. In fact, when was that Loma fight? Let me just get that correct. I'm sure it was 2013 or 2014. Oh, look. He fought Lomachenko 2014. 8 years ago. 8 years ago. And this guy's still been cramming down into that weight class. And it's even worse when you're inactive. I mean, if you're active and making it, it's fine. But when you are fighting once a year, he's not fought. Gary Russell Jr. has not fought for nearly 2 years. For nearly 2 years. His last fight was the 8th of February 2020. Been nearly 2 years. It's going to be difficult to make the 126 pound limit. He'll make it, but it's going to be very, very tight. So look, again, if he's undercooked, if he's tight at the weight, there's going to be a problem. There is. Now look, I've always been a bit tough on him because of the inactivity. Now he's come out and said things recently like, he's tried to make fights that haven't happened, and I get that. I understand. I mean, one that he definitely tried to make was Leo Santa Cruz. But with all due respect, Leo Santa Cruz at the same time had to fight against Gervonta Davis. So when he wanted to fight Leo wanted to fight Gervonta, Leo got Gervonta. What's the bigger fight? If you're Leo, which fight are you going to go for? Are you going to go for a unification? And it would have been a unification. Leo Santa Cruz, by the way, he's still the WBA 126 pound champion, by the way. But do you do that? Or do you go for Gervonta at a higher weight class? You go for Gervonta at a higher weight class. Number one, it's more money. If you win, it's bigger. Everything, every single thing. And even if you lose, you lost to Gervonta Davis at a higher weight class. You go for that. So as much as Gary Russell can say things like, I tried to get the Leo fight. Well, Leo's got a bigger fish to fry. Then he's got to start looking at what's in and around him. Look, he's called everyone out. I mean, Gary Russell Jr. bloody called out Terence Crawford. Do you remember Terence made the video saying he'll break his neck? He's called out a lot of people. He's called out Shakur Stevenson. I don't know how realistic those fights are. What about in your own division? Navarreti's there. Navarreti's a great fight for him. The WBO champion. IBF, we're now going to have Kiko Martinez versus Josh Warrington. The WBA, which really should be legit belt now, because I think Leo Santa Cruz will finally move up and vacate. Lee Wood versus Michael Conlan. These are fights he should be having. He should be in the mix with these guys. He really should. Even before Lee Wood fought Zhu Can, it should have really been Gary Russell Jr. versus Zhu Can. It really should have. I mean, I don't know why he's not been able to get those fights. Now look, those guys, to be fair, could be avoiding him. Those guys could. Because I would favour Gary Russell Jr. with all of those, including Emmanuel Navarrete, but he's got to make those fights. If not those, you look at a fight at 130, Chris Colbert, you look at those type of fights potentially. And even those, he might miss out on that because I think Chris Colbert will fight the winner of Shakur Stevenson versus Oscar Valdez. So I'm not quite sure. Look, I want to think that after this, he starts to knuckle down, get serious, and really go for it now, because he hasn't got long left. Again, he's 33. And there are big fights out there. Gary Russell Jr. is still a big name. I don't know if he's a big name in terms of viewing figures and bums on seats, but in terms of a boxing fan, me watching him, he's a big, big name. He's a really big name. And he's a very, very good fighter. I mean, even if you go back to the Loma fight, which was such a long time ago, but Loma was fresh then, very fresh. I think Loma at the time was 1-1. Obviously, he lost to Salido. That was a very good Loma. It was a majority decision. That shows how good Gary Russell Jr. was, or still is, I'm not quite sure. I spoke to Tony Bellew the other day about Gary Russell Jr. and Tony was telling some stories about him as an amateur. He remembers when it was USA versus England and Gary Russell Jr. came over, and I can't remember the name that Tony mentioned, but he said Gary Russell Jr. schooled him. Like, he was so good, so fast, incredible. And back then, you would have thought that this is a guy that would have gone through the weight classes. I mean, look, regardless, he's had a good career. I mean, there's some good wins on there. Like Jojo Diaz win, looks really good now, doesn't it? But I don't know, man. I expected a bit more from Gary Russell Jr. And that's why, again, if he's not on his A game, I think there could be a problem this weekend. I really do, because you've only got to watch Mark Masayo's fights, and he's so aggressive. He's so aggressive. Look, he's open to get countered. He is. He can catch him with a left. I'm trying to think. I think his knockdowns have they been by left hooks? I can't remember. You can catch him. You can catch him to the body as well, and Gary Russell Jr. is a good body puncher. So look, Gary should win, but if he's not fully focused, and I don't think he was in his recent fight, he could lose. And I don't know, I'm giving him an excuse. I don't know if it was a case of not being focused or maybe slippage. We are starting to see it. And again, it catches up when you're an old guy in the lower weight classes and you've not moved up in weight. It can catch up with you. And I think it might be catching up with Gary Russell Jr. So look, I'm very intrigued in the fight. And again, I will say this, I wouldn't be shocked if Mark Masayo beats him. I would not be shocked. If you haven't seen Mark Masayo's fights, I think Julio Cesar fight is on YouTube. You can check out highlights are on YouTube as well, but I think the full fight's on YouTube. Go and check it out. Again, he gets put down in that fight, but he does get up and he rallies, and he'll keep on coming. He'll keep on coming, and the power stays until the 12th round. He's got more power than Gary Russell Jr., I'll tell you that now. But in fairness, Julio Cesar is a super bantam really as well. So look, Gary Russell Jr. is a big, strong 126 pounder, but I don't know, man. I sense a bit of an upset here. I hope I'm wrong, because I want to see Gary Russell Jr. in those fights. Like I said, against, I want him to call out the other guys in the division, call them out, or if not, go to 130 and start making waves there. But he needs to make a move, because he's going to look back and think, what a wasted career. And look, he might be one of those fighters that, it's going to sound stupid here, don't like fighting. I know that sounds really dumb, but I look at someone like Keith Thurman like that, where they don't really, they've got other things outside of boxing. Like, boxing is not absolutely everything to him. So whereas I say, only fights once a year, he's probably thinking, I make my 250, 150 grand, and I'm cool with that one fight a year. Maybe he's like that. Maybe he's not one of those guys that are chasing, I need that millions and those big fights. He might not be that guy. But I look at him and think, man, this is a tough sport. Get as much money as you can for your talent. And I think he's not getting as much money as he can for his talent. That's what I think. Anyway, all right, let's see if there's any quick news before we pack up. It's a bit late. It's very late, actually. Coley, Canelo Makabu is an interesting fight. I'd be shocked if Canelo wanted me. Now, Canelo would never. I mean, Coley's going to go to heavyweight. Canelo would never, ever call out Coley. Never, ever. What else have we got here? Kambosos Haney, Hearn confident that he can get the fight done. Yeah, I think as much as I wanted it to be Kambosos Lomachenko, because I want Loma to get his belts back, I think it will be Haney. I think Hearn will offer good money, and I think the fight will obviously be an Australian. It'll do good numbers as well. I'm not. I think Kambosos could beat Haney. I'm not. I don't think it'll be a big upset if Kambosos beats Haney. By the way, not for me. It wouldn't be at all. Anything else? Timothy Bradley. This is interesting. Spence is running away from Crawford. I'm worried about his eye in Ugas fight. I'm telling you now, this is a banana skin for Errol Spence, Ugas. Yordenis Ugas is no slouch, people. No. I think a lot of people are maybe, oh yeah, Spence will beat him, and then, Spence versus Crawford for the undisputed. Boxing don't work like that. It ain't that easy. It's never been that easy. There's always a problem, always a spanner thrown into the works, as they say. And I think, again, look, last year was the year of the upsets. I'm not quite sure how the eyes healed up. We don't know. I know he has been sparring, so I'm guessing it's fine. But Ugas is a big problem for Errol Spence. I think Errol Spence will get the job done, but it's going to be very, very, very close. It might be so close to the point where we say Ugas won, but Spence gets it. Interesting. What's this one? Lee Wood, I visualize getting Michael Conlan out of there. Yeah. He certainly could do that. I favour Lee Wood. It's weird though, like being around Barry Jones and Andy Clark and even Rob Tebbutt, I think they all favour Michael Conlan. At least Barry and Andy did. I'm not quite sure actually what Rob said, but I favour Lee Wood to get the job done here. I really do. I think confidence is a big thing in boxing, and now that he is a world champion, now he's coming off that good win against, is it Zhu Can or Kanju? I always say Kanju. I think we're seeing a different Lee Wood. I don't think this is the Lee Wood that lost to Jazza Dickens, put it that way. I think they could run that fight back and Lee Wood would win now, I think. I don't even think it's a styles make fights thing. I think it's a confidence thing. And I think he now thinks, finally, I belong. And I expect a really, really good fight. Plus, you have the home crowd with him. I say that a lot of the Irish will travel for Michael Conlan, so it's going to be a really good atmosphere as well. This is interesting. Inoue versus Donaire rematch in negotiations for April in Japan. I always wanted to see Inoue versus Casemiro. I'm not quite sure what's going on, if I'm honest with you, but Inoue Donaire, fine, I'll take that one as well. I mean, I'm not going to complain. It was fight of the year a couple of years ago for me. That was a really good fight. I think that alongside Josh Taylor Prograis were my fights of the year. So look, you can do it again. Donaire's not slipped much, has he? Which is surprising. It's weird though. I remember reading, and it must have been just fake news, that Donaire was going to retire last year. Do you remember that? Or was that just fake news? And all of a sudden we're talking about him versus Inoue. What's this one? Fury White. Hernfield's March date is starting to look unrealistic. I think the fight's starting to look unrealistic. Fuck the date, the fight. But yeah, that fight's never happening in March. We're coming, 18th of January. So if it were happening in March, you're talking about the fighters getting in camp now. Although Fury is doing bits, so is Dillian Whyte, they're doing bits, but it's not an official camp. So I don't know, man. It's a fight I want to happen. I'm not quite sure. By the way, this fight happens. If Fury fights Whyte, it's 100% happening over here. That's fact. Gareth A. Davis, we did our show today, and he spoke to Bob Arum and Frank Warren on Saturday, and both of them said it's going to happen in the UK if it happens. So, yeah, it's not a big enough fight in America. It's not. And it doesn't even, forget all that, he's got the ESPN deal, forget all that for a second. It's just not a big enough fight. It's a big fight in the UK, and I think there's more money, and this is what's important here, there's more money for this fight to be made in the UK than there is in America. It's just fact. What else we got? Anything else? Joe Smith's co-promoter saying yards not the mandatory right now. Interesting. I thought he was. WBO might not order it. I think they will order it. I think the WBO will order it. And if they do, I fancy Yard to beat Joe Smith. I really do. And then Yard's in such a great position, because if Yard were to win, my Boatsi versus Yard thing that I really want to happen could happen, because I think the only way that fight happens is if there's a world title on the line. What I would really love is, look, dream world here. This is dream world. Yard fight Joe Smith. Bivol fight Joshua Boatsi. Fingers crossed both Brits come through. Imagine that WBO, WBA unification fight, O2 Arena, 2 world titles. Jeez. All right, this is interesting. Leo Santa Cruz saying, after this fight, as long as everything goes good, my next one will be at 126. I mean, it's interesting, but very disappointing if you're Lee Wood or Michael Conlan, because that basically, and look, by the way, Leo Santa Cruz has not fought 126 pounds, I think, for about 2.5, 3 years. That's no joke. 2.5, 3 years. Yeah, he's still the WBA champion. That's how boxing's all over the place. All over the place. But if you're Lee Wood or Michael Conlan, you're going to be upset because that means you're basically still... Like, Leo Santa Cruz is the super champion, by the way. So I don't know if Lee Wood thinks of himself as a world champion. I do, but he's not. He's not officially because of this issue and this nonsense with Leo Santa Cruz. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. All right, guys, I think that's it. It was just a quick video. I think we're done. Are we done? Yeah, we are done. All right, guys, thank you very much. Peace.